Jim with Twisted Hobbies. Today we're building a Pittsbull. Okay, I am super pumped about the Hacker Pittsbull because the Mad Bull's one of my favorite planes and I heard nothing but good things about the Pittsbull. So we are ready to go. I have the power combo from Twisted Hobbies, which includes the motor, the prop, the ESC, and the servos. Separate from that, we have our receiver and our trusty foam tack. Mmm, delicious. Don't eat it though. So, in the box, the thing I love about Hacker models is they always include a manual. How fantastic. It's a printed manual, but man, that's black and white. It's 2025, we should be using color, so I always go online and I print out the color version of this because I like it better in color. So, let's get going on this build.
First thing we're going to do is empty out the box. There was a little piece of carbon fiber that was stuck in there, so make sure we're getting everything out. I fold over all my surfaces. I put a heavy battery on them, keep them there for about an hour or two, and then we keep inventorying our parts. Now we're ready to glue our wings together. First thing I need is some parchment paper so I don't end up gluing these to the table. I spread some glue on it, I pull it apart for a minute, and then I press it back together for a complete bond. Then we're going to go with our aileron support standoffs, and then we're going to do our wing spars. I give them both a good dry fit, and then I'm going to fill the slot with some foam tack. You could also use CA on this, but I like using foam tack, so that's what we're going to do. Once those are in, I'm going to put something heavy on them, let them dry, and then we're going to start on our aileron control horns. So I pop those out, and while we're at it, let's pop out those gang horns that go on the top wing. This is a great time to install the adjustable end links on the gang horns, because once you get them glued into place, it's a little harder to install these. So I have this little block of wood that's got a little hole to push in the clips, and then I just glue those into place, along with the aileron control horns. Now that those are all glued into place, we're going to start on our aileron bracing. I'm looking for all the 155mm long pieces. We got 4 of them on each of the ailerons. And these are all the perfect length, so we're going to just put some foam tack on the ends and get them where they need to go. And we just want to make sure these are nice and flat as the glue sets up. And at this point, we are all done with the wings, and we are now moving on to the elevator. We're going to pop out all the pieces to it. We're going to mount all of them onto this carbon fiber tube, and then glue it all into place. I'm using this piece of wood with some holes in it just to be able to press through the carbon fiber rod. And once I get all these on, I kind of realize that the innermost supports really are too snug, so I need to go back and loosen them up. These are the ones that are going to be glued to the horizontal fuselage. So I use some sandpaper, I use an X-Acto blade just a little bit to make it so that it can spin freely through those. Then once we get all of those on and in generally the right place, let's put on the adjustable end link. This is much easier to mount now rather than when it's on the plane. Then we're gonna do a lot of adjusting until everything is in just the right spot. So much fiddling and adjusting until I think it's perfect. Now we're ready to glue the elevator control horn onto the elevator tube, and I hit this with some kicker because we don't want it getting stuck to the fuselage. Just a little bit more adjusting, and then we can start gluing all of the supports into place. Once I glue the supports in, then we'll also run a little bead down the edge of the tube as well. It's really important that everything here is laying flat as it dries. And I do use some kicker here to make sure that I'm getting the glue to set up so I don't end up spreading it around on it. Now is the most critical part. We want to really make sure that we don't get any CA onto the tube, only onto the supports that go on the sides of the fuselage there. Next up is the longitudinal bracing that goes down the length of the horizontal fuselage. And I make sure I've got a clean tip on my foam tack, and then fill those slots with some foam tack and put these into place. Then let's double check that elevator and make sure it is moving freely. And then we're ready to put on the bottom half of the vertical fuselage. Notice here I put it right next to it so I can tell where the glue is supposed to go. We get it into place, and then we triple check to make sure everything is at 90 degrees. Next up is going to be the bracing that goes along the bottom of the plane, and pay particular attention to the sizes on these. There's a couple that are up front that are a little longer than the rest of them. And my method for putting these in is that I glue one end, and then I measure it, I trim it off, and then I glue the other end. That way each of them is the perfect length. And then we do the same thing on the other side. You can sand the ends of these before you glue them in place, but I have really not noticed a difference between ones that I have or haven't sanded. They seem to all glue up just fine. Then we're going to double check that everything is still square, making adjustments as needed. Then we're ready to place in the landing gear. We'll dry fit it together, and then we just glue that all into place. Next up, we'll need some electronics in the plane, so I'm going to bind my receiver, center my servos, calibrate my ESC, and verify motor direction. There is a whole video on this in the description if you want some more detail on that process. Now I'm going to find my servo horn extensions, and we're going to glue those together. Although the manual does not call for it, I think I'd like to use some thread and some CA to really make sure that these are going to stay together. And with all those servo extensions completed, I started screwing them onto the servos, but I would hold off on that step until later because we still need to feed the push rods through those. It's much harder to do when they're already in the plane. Now we can install the servos into the plane. And keep in mind the elevator servo gets installed upside down. And make sure you intentionally route your wires. I like mine on the left side of the plane. Then I run a bead of foam tack, and I push everything into place, make sure it's at 90 degrees. Then we'll install the vertical fuselage support. Then we're ready to start making push rods and gang rods to connect the ailerons together. You may notice I'm missing the aileron push rods. I should have done those at the same time, that way I could get them all done. And on these we use the heat shrink and CA to tie everything together. Make sure to be extra careful with your heat gun so that you don't accidentally melt your plane or your table. I wouldn't know anything about that. Next we'll pop out all of our pushrod guides. And I went to put on the first one and it was rather tight, so I opened it up a little bit with my pin vise, but I should have used a larger 1.2 millimeter bit to open these up because I had some binding issues, and before my first flight I even had to disassemble this whole thing and open those up some more. And now we're ready to start installing our push rods. Here's where I was telling you that you should hold off on installing the servo horn, and it's because you had to take it off in order to do this part. So put your servo horn on, and then you'll be able to install your elevator pushrod. We push each of the pushrod guides into the bottom of the horizontal fuselage, and then we're going to be able to glue those in place. And you'll see here that I'm using CA for this. If you use something like foam tack and it's kind of stringy, you really run the risk of that getting onto your pushrod and having it bind up. So I like to use CA for this. Now that we're done with our push rods, we are ready to move on to our inner plane struts. So we're going to cut these apart and then put the carbon fiber stiffener between them and then glue them back together. Next up, we're ready to install the top wing, and I'm really going to take the time to measure it out and make sure that everything's at 90 degrees as it dries. Then we'll be installing the struts that go from the wing to the horizontal fuselage. And I just want to make sure that I'm not cutting these struts at the wrong length, so I'm really taking the time to measure between the tip of the wing and the top of the vertical stabilizer. So make sure that stays nice and even from side to side as I'm putting in these struts. We glue in our interplane struts, and then I am a little bit embarrassed to admit, but I started installing this wing totally upside down. This is the top of the bottom wing, and I should have the whole thing flipped over. Now, I didn't realize that until I went to go hook up the servos, so I spent a lot of time here getting all this stuff just right, and then I just had to tear it all apart later. But that is what happens when you're building models sometimes, and it's what I do, so that way you guys know that I make mistakes too. I've built dozens of these planes, but still, things happen. I'm working really hard here to get the servos glued into place, and this is about where I realize that something is very wrong. So then I have to remove the servos, I have to remove the wing, I have to remove the struts, pull everything off, I cut it free, flip that wing over the way it should go, put some more foam tack on it, and no one will ever know. I mean, except for everybody watching this video.
Nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know. How would they know?
Okay, now that that's glued on the right way, let's install these servos and make sure that you're running your wires over to whatever side your receiver is going to be on. And then let's make these push rods. Here I take off the servo horn and I'm pressing through the adjustable end link. Once those end links are installed, then we'll assemble the push rods using heat shrink tubing and a little bit of thin CA to secure those into place. Then we can install those push rods and trim the excess carbon fiber off the end, and then I hit it with just a drop of CA. Then we can install our tail skid and get to work on our landing gear. With the landing gear, there's two options. There's one with wheels or one with small skids if you're just going to be using it indoors. I didn't mind a little extra weight, and I like the look of the wheels. Assembly of these is pretty straightforward. There's two little circles that go onto the axle. One holds the wheel in place, and then the other is going to be able to glue the wheel pants too. And I just poke a little hole right above this notch for the axle to go through. Next up is assembling our gang horns. I tried to push that through. It wasn't quite big enough, so I had to open it up just a little. That's great. And then we loosen these up. And just be careful when you're tightening these down, as you don't want to crush the carbon fiber. Then I was going to install the control horn for the rudder, but then I realized I should probably put the end link on first. So I got that in. Make sure your end link is at the top of that. And then glue on your rudder and put your push rod through the end link. Then we'll glue on our motor mount. And then I'm going to sand these pieces to make them sharp at one end. And then I put them into my pin vise and use that to drill holes into the EPP. You want to make sure it's going right down the middle, and then you can get it installed. And that seemed to work really well. Once I got all 4 of those into place, I glued them with some CA, cut them off, and then gave them a quick little sand. Then I trimmed off the excess on the gang rods, and then we are ready to start installing our electronics. So I screw the motor into place. And I plug everything into the receiver, and then we're going to glue the receiver and ESC to the vertical fuselage. Then we can balance our prop. I'm just going to use a piece of Scotch tape on this. Then we can install our prop and then mark our center of gravity at 220 millimeters back from the motor mount. So I just put a mark on the bottom of the plane where those are, and then I'm able to balance it with the battery to make sure that the battery is in the correct position before I put the Velcro in place. Okay, here we go on our maiden flight. I am flying this on a 2S 550 milliamp hour battery. So my first priority here is to get it trimmed a little bit, make sure it's flying okay. Then I'll go back after this flight and maybe move my battery around a little bit to really lock in my center of gravity so that it's flying nice. Additionally, it is a little bit breezy for this model. This is definitely a light air or indoor model because it is so light and nimble, but it does get pushed around with the wind a little bit, as you can see from my flying here, but it's able to fly great. I give it a little knife edge loop here. It's got a very predictable and precise flight envelope. I feel like I can really make it do anything that I can do as a pilot. If I were a better pilot, I could probably do a lot more with it. It does really great at low speed and feels like Harrier is just a natural position for it. It is a little draggy when you're trying to push into wind or something because it's got both the wings to slow it down a little bit more. It feels really great and knife edge, feels well balanced. I can probably adjust this a little bit more as I get my CG really dialed in, but for the most part it feels like it gets locked right into knife edge and stays there until I push out of it. I try to do a bit of a knife edge spin, but I don't have it quite figured out on this model at this point. I've done probably 15 flights since this, and I've definitely gotten it working much better. It really does wrap up because it has the full floating elevator, so it does like to spin right around. Let's put it into a nice little square loop. And inverted flying on this guy is really predictable, really smooth. exactly what you would expect from it, and it doesn't have any bad tendencies inverted at all. I do manage to get a bit of a knife edge spin out of it, and just a little close to the ground on the recovery, but that is all part of it, because as you get used to a new model, you really figure out exactly how much elevator to give it, and you can be a lot more smooth with coming in and out of your maneuvers. I have a friend who always asks me, how much does your model weigh? This one came out to 161 grams without the battery. So she's nice and floaty, great for indoor, okay for outdoor, very precise. I know a bunch of people are going to also be interested in how I would compare this to the Mad Bull, and I would say this one flies a lot more like a traditional 3D plane than the Mad Bull because of its high wing and its funky tendencies. This one is much more solid and predictable. It really floats and hangs in the air a lot more than other models, but it slows down quicker when you get off the throttle because of all the drag that the other set of wings provides. I'm really glad I was able to get this model built before our indoor season started. I know I'm going to be getting a lot of flights on this one. I hope this build video helped you to build your Pittsbull, and I hope you're going to be enjoying it as much as I am.